I found the lease agreement in her desk drawer while looking for our insurance papers. It was dated 3 months ago. Just her name. No mine. That's when I realized. My wife had been planning a life without me, and I never saw it coming. I stood there for a moment, holding the paper like it might somehow explain itself. The apartment was downtown, one of those modern buildings with floor-to-ceiling windows and amenities I knew we couldn't afford together. But apparently, Marin could afford it alone. Or maybe not alone. I didn't know. That was the problem. I didn't know anything anymore. I put the lease back exactly where I found it and closed the drawer slowly, like I was trying not to wake something up. My hands were shaking, but not in that dramatic way you see in movies. It was more like a low-grade tremor, the kind you get when your body knows something's wrong before your brain fully catches up. We'd been married 6 years, together for 8. No huge fights, no obvious problems. At least that's what I thought. But standing there in our home office, I started replaying the last few months in my head, and suddenly things I'd dismissed as nothing felt like something. The work dinners. There were more of them recently. She'd come home late, apologize quickly, and go straight to shower. I never questioned it. Why would I? She had a demanding job. I had mine. We were adults with careers and responsibilities. That's what I told myself. Then there were the weekend trips, conferences, she said, team-building retreats. She'd send me photos sometimes, group shots with colleagues I vaguely recognized, smiling in front of hotel lobbies or conference centers. I'd text back a thumbs-up emoji and go back to watching whatever was on TV. I remembered something she said a few weeks ago. We were having breakfast, and out of nowhere she mentioned needing to think about her future. I asked what she meant, and she just shrugged and said something about career goals. I nodded and finished my coffee. The conversation lasted maybe 30 seconds. Now I wondered if she'd been trying to tell me something, and I just wasn't listening. I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch we'd picked out together 3 years ago. It was expensive, one of those purchases you make when you're planning a life with someone, when you think you're building something permanent. I didn't confront her that night. I'm not even sure why. Maybe I wanted to be certain before I said anything. Maybe I was afraid of what she'd say if I asked. Or maybe part of me already knew, and I just wasn't ready to hear it out loud yet. When Marin came home around 9, she kissed my forehead and asked about my day. I said it was fine. She said hers was long. We ordered takeout and watched half of a show neither of us cared about. She fell asleep on my shoulder. I stayed awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long someone can plan to leave while still lying next to you every night. The next few days felt like living in a house where all the furniture had been moved 2 inches to the left. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before, not spying exactly, just noticing. And once you start noticing, it's hard to stop. Marin had always been organized with money, but when I checked our joint account, I saw regular transfers going out. 500 here, 700 there, always to an account I didn't recognize. The transactions went back almost 4 months. I sat at my laptop scrolling through the history and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Just this quiet, spreading certainty that I'd been living in a different marriage than she had. I found other things, too. Small things that individually meant nothing, but together started forming a picture I didn't want to see. A phone charger in her car that didn't match her iPhone. Receipts from restaurants and neighborhoods she never mentioned visiting. A yoga membership she'd never told me about, even though she came home in workout clothes twice a week. One night, I tried to talk to her. Really talk. Not about bills or groceries or whose turn it was to call the plumber. I asked how she was doing, what she'd been thinking about lately, whether she was happy. Basic questions. The kind you should be able to ask your wife. She looked up from her phone, smiled a little, and said everything was fine. Just work stress. Then she asked if I'd remembered to schedule the car inspection, and the conversation was over. That word, fine, started haunting me. Everything was always fine. She was fine. We were fine. Work was fine. But fine isn't happy. Fine is just the word you use when you don't want to talk about what's actually happening. I suggested we plan something together. A weekend trip, maybe. Something to reconnect. She nodded and said, "Yeah, let's talk about that later." Then she went back to her phone. Later. That had become her favorite word lately. Later we'd talk. Later we'd plan. Later we'd figure it out. But later never seemed to come. A week after I found the lease, we had to attend one of her company events. I didn't want to go, but she'd already told them I was coming. So I put on a button-down shirt and forced myself to make small talk with people I barely knew. That's where I met Desmond. He worked in Marin's department, seemed friendly enough. We were standing near the drinks table when he mentioned how impressed he was with Marin's courage. I asked what he meant. He looked at me like I'd just asked him to explain what water was. "You know," he said, "making such a big change, starting over, that takes guts." I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my face neutral. "Right," I said. "Yeah, definitely." He seemed to realize something then. His expression shifted. I'm going to grab another drink," he said, and walked away quickly. I stood there holding my beer, surrounded by people laughing and networking, and felt completely alone. Marin knew something I didn't. Her co-workers knew. Probably half the people in this room knew. I was the only one still pretending everything was fine. I didn't sleep much after the company event. I kept thinking about Desmond's face when he realized I didn't know what he was talking about. That awkward, pitying look people get when they've accidentally said too much. The next morning, I was taking out the recycling when I saw it. A crumpled invoice at the bottom of the bin, partially covered by junk mail. I wouldn't have noticed except the letterhead caught my eye. Greenway Counseling Services, Couples Therapy. I pulled it out and smoothed the paper against my leg. The date was from 2 weeks ago. The address was downtown, not far from where that lease had been signed. I'd never been to couples therapy with Marin. We'd never even discussed it. I put the invoice in my pocket and went back inside. Marin was in the kitchen making coffee, humming something under her breath. She looked so normal, so present, like everything was exactly as it should be. "I need to ask you something," I said. She turned, still holding the coffee pot. "Sure. What's up?" My mouth felt dry. "Are you seeing someone else?" The silence that followed wasn't long, maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like standing on the edge of something and watching the ground crumble away beneath my feet. She didn't say no. She didn't look shocked or offended. She just set the coffee pot down carefully and took a breath. "It's not what you think," she said finally. "I'm not cheating on you." "Then what is it?" She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Not defensive exactly. More like she was holding herself together. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this. I didn't want it to come out like this." "Tell me what, Marin?" "I've been unhappy," she said quietly. "For a long time. And I've been talking to someone. His name is Leith. We knew each other in college. We reconnected last year, and we've gotten close." The kitchen felt too small suddenly. Too bright. "How close?" "Emotionally, not physically. I haven't slept with him, if that's what you're asking. But I care about him. And I think I've been using that connection to avoid dealing with us." I sat down at the table because standing felt like too much effort. "The apartment downtown, the lease." She nodded. "I signed it 3 months ago. I was going to tell you when the time was right." "When would that have been? When you were already moved out?" "I don't know," she said. And for the first time, she sounded as lost as I felt. "I don't know what I'm doing, Callum. I just know I can't keep pretending." "Pretending what?" "That I'm happy here. That we're okay. That I haven't been feeling invisible for the last year. That word hit me harder than anything else. Invisible. I thought about all the times I'd nodded without really listening, all the conversations I'd ended with my phone in my hand, all the nights I'd assumed everything was fine because it was easier than asking if it wasn't. You felt invisible, I said slowly, and instead of talking to me about it, you found someone else. I know how that sounds. Do you? She didn't answer. She just looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe. Or relief. Or both. Myron asked for a trial separation. She wanted to explore what she had with Leith without officially ending our marriage. Just to see, she said, like we were trying out a new restaurant instead of dismantling 8 years together. I told her no. Not because I was angry, though part of me was, but because I knew what she was really asking for, permission to keep me as a backup plan while she figured out if someone else could make her happier. It's either we work on this together or we separate, I said. I'm not going to wait around while you decide if I'm good enough. She moved out 2 weeks later, took her clothes, her books, half the kitchen stuff we'd accumulated over the years. The apartment felt huge after she left, echoey, like a museum of a life that used to exist. I didn't tell many people the full story. My brother knew, a couple of close friends, but mostly I kept it quiet. It felt too raw to explain, and I didn't want to be the guy everyone pitied at gatherings. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Okafor. She was in her 50s, had this calm way of asking questions that made you think without feeling interrogated. In our 3rd session, she asked me something that stuck. What did you lose, Callum? And what did you avoid losing? I didn't understand at first. But over the next few weeks, I started to realize what she meant. I'd lost Marin, yes. But I'd avoided losing more years in a marriage where neither of us was truly present. I'd avoided becoming the kind of person who stays out of fear rather than love. It didn't make it hurt less, but it made it make sense. 3 months passed. I heard through mutual friends that Marin seemed stressed, that things with Leith weren't what she'd expected. Apparently he'd lost his job and was struggling financially. She was covering rent, groceries, everything. The emotional connection they'd built from a distance was harder to maintain when reality set in. I didn't feel vindicated hearing that, just tired. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Marin. Can we talk? I think we need to. We met at a cafe halfway between where we used to live and where she lived now. She looked thinner, more worn down. She ordered tea but didn't drink it, just wrapped her hands around the cup like she was cold. I made a mistake, she said. I waited. Leith isn't who I thought he was, or maybe he is, and I just built him up into something he wasn't. Either way, it's not working, and I've been thinking about us, about whether we could try again. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. I would have been grateful just to have her back, but sitting across from her now, I realized something had shifted in me. I'm seeing someone, I said. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh. Her name is Isla. We met through a hiking group. It's still new, but it's good. We actually talk. About real things. Right, Marin said quietly. That's good. I'm happy for you. I wasn't sure either of us believed that. Marin stirred her tea slowly, watching the spoon go around in circles. I don't understand, she said. You were always so patient with me, so willing to work things out. Now you're just done? I'm not done out of anger, I said. I'm done because I finally understand what happened. We both stopped showing up. You found someone else to fill that gap. I found myself. She looked up at me. When did you become so calm about all this? I almost laughed. I'm not calm. I'm just not drowning anymore. There was a long pause. She picked at the edge of her napkin, tearing small pieces and rolling them between her fingers. I keep thinking about that morning you asked if I was seeing someone else. You already knew, didn't you? I nodded. I found the lease 3 weeks before that conversation. Her face changed. Surprise, maybe embarrassment. 3 weeks? And you didn't say anything? I needed time to process, to figure out what I was dealing with. I talked to a lawyer, made sure our finances were separated, started seeing a therapist. I wasn't going to have that conversation until I was ready. You were preparing to leave me while I thought you were clueless. I was protecting myself while you were planning to leave me, I said. There's a difference. She sat back in her chair, something like respect flickering across her face. Or maybe it was just recognition, that the person sitting across from her wasn't the same one she'd left. I really did feel invisible, she said quietly. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but it's the truth. I believe you, and I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I got comfortable, complacent. I stopped asking questions because I assumed I already knew the answers. That's on me. So we're both guilty. We're both human, I said. We made mistakes. We grew apart. It happens. She took a shaky breath. I thought Leith understood me in ways you didn't, but he just reflected back what I wanted to see. You know what I mean? I did. You wanted someone to make you feel seen without having to do the hard work of actually being seen. Yeah. She wiped her eyes quickly. That sounds about right. We sat there for a while, not saying much. The cafe hummed around us. Conversations, laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine. Life going on like it always does. The divorce papers should be ready next week, I said eventually. My lawyer will send them over. She nodded. Okay. I hope things work out for you, Maren. I really do. Just maybe not with me. I hope things work out with Isla, she said, and this time I thought she might actually mean it. We left separately. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel for a minute, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, exactly, but peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop fighting against something and just let it be what it is. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. No drama, no courtroom battles, just paperwork and signatures and the quiet end of something that had already ended long before. Maren was single again. I heard Leith had moved back to his hometown. She was in therapy, actually working on herself this time. I was still seeing Isla. We talked about everything. Fears, hopes, the messy parts neither of us had quite figured out yet. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that made all the difference. Sometimes betrayal doesn't end with revenge or public humiliation. Sometimes it just ends with two people realizing they weren't right for each other anymore. And sometimes the best thing you can do is let go, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. Here's what I learned through all of this. You can't control someone else's choices. You can only control how you respond. Maren taught me that love isn't enough without communication, presence, and honesty. And I taught myself that self-respect means knowing when to walk away. Not because you hate someone, but because you both deserve better. We both needed to grow. We just needed to do it separately. And in the end, that was okay. If this story made you think, or if you've been through something similar, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you want more real, honest stories like this, no drama, no exaggeration, just life as it actually happens, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for listening. And remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply know your worth and act accordingly.